Howdy folks. If you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because today, we're going to be diving deep into some of the most chilling, bone-rattling tales that have ever been whispered across the United States. These aren't just campfire stories, or make-believe monsters. These are accounts rooted in real places, experienced by real people, that will make the hair on the back of your neck stand straight up. We're talking about those moments where the world you think you know peels back just a little, revealing something cold and ancient and utterly terrifying underneath. So, I invite you to settle in, maybe grab a blanket and prepare yourself. We're about to embark on a journey through shadowy backroads, haunted hotel corridors, and quiet, unassuming towns that hold some truly dark secrets. Each story we'll explore today is a piece of a much larger, much more unsettling puzzle about the America you don't see on postcards. These are the narratives that get passed down in hushed tones, the legends that locals swear are true, and the unsolved mysteries that continue to baffle investigators and frighten residents to this very day. I've scoured the country, metaphorically speaking, to bring you a compilation of stories that are guaranteed to stay with you long after the video ends. So, go ahead, I dare you. Turn off the lights, silence your phone, make sure the doors are locked. Not that it will help if what you're afraid of is already inside. We want you to feel like you're right there, in the moment, experiencing the creeping dread and the heart-pounding terror alongside the people who lived through it. This is more than just a collection of scary stories. It's an immersive experience designed to tap into that primal fear that we all share. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what lurks just outside the circle of light cast by our metaphorical campfire. Are you ready? Because the like button knows when you're scared, and it's waiting for you to tell it that you're prepared to face the darkness. But be warned, once we begin, there's no turning back. The stories you are about to hear are deeply unsettling, and they might just change the way you look at the world around you. They might make you think twice about that strange noise you hear late at night, or that fleeting shadow you see in the corner of your eye. You have been warned. Now let's begin. Adams, Tennessee holds one of America's most terrifying paranormal legends, the Bell Witch. Around 1817, strange events began on John Bell's farm. Bell saw an unnatural animal in his cornfield. Soon, unsettling sounds moved into the Bell home. The family was tormented by knocking and scraping. They heard choking sounds. The entity, called Kate, focused on John's daughter Betsy, pulling covers and leaving bruises. It was a brutal assault. The entity found its voice, whispering and then speaking. It knew everything, mocking and exposing secrets. Visitors, including Andrew Jackson, became targets. The torment escalated, spreading to John Bell, who suffered strange ailments. The family lived in terror. Word spread, and the Bell farm became infamous. John Bell grew weaker. In December 1820, he slipped into a stupor. A strange vial was found, and the witch claimed she had poisoned him. The vial's contents killed a cat instantly. John Bell died. At his funeral, the entity's voice joined the hymns. The entity promised to return, leaving a legacy of fear in Adams, Tennessee. Now, we travel from the haunted farmlands of Tennessee to the serene, picturesque shores of Lake Bottom in Finland. I know this is a USA horror story compilation, but this particular story is so chilling, so infamous, and has so many elements that feel like they're straight out of an American slasher film, that it has become a staple of true crime and mystery lore around the world. It's a story that starts with youthful innocence and ends in a brutal, unsolved mystery that has haunted a nation for over 60 years. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most beautiful places can hide the darkest of secrets. It was June 4th, 1960. The school year had just ended, and the promise of a long, warm summer stretched out before the youth of Finland. Two 15-year-old girls, Mila Irmeli Björklund and Anja Tuulikki-Maki, decided to celebrate their freedom by going on a camping trip. They invited their 18-year-old boyfriends, Seppo Antero Boisman and Nils Wilhelm Gustafsson, to join them. It was the perfect plan for a group of teenagers, a beautiful lake, a secluded spot, and a night under the stars, away from the watchful eyes of their parents. They packed their tent, grabbed their motorcycles, and headed for the southern shore of Lake Bottom. They found an idyllic spot on a small cape, a peaceful clearing surrounded by trees, with a gentle slope leading down to the calm, dark water of the lake. They set up their single tent, laughing and talking, completely unaware that this peaceful setting would soon become the stage for a horrific act of violence. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the pine trees, They likely felt a sense of perfect contentment. They were young, in love, and had the whole summer ahead of them. There was no reason for them to suspect that they were being watched, or that they were in any danger whatsoever. The night was likely filled with the typical sounds of a lakeside campsite, the gentle lapping of water, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Inside the tent, the 4 teenagers settled in for the night. Mila and Seppo were a couple, as were Anya and Niels. They were packed together in the small space, a tangle of limbs and sleeping bags. They were vulnerable, isolated, and completely oblivious to the fact that a human monster was lurking just outside the thin canvas walls of their tent, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The last night of their lives had begun. The sun rose on the morning of June 5th, its light filtering through the trees and illuminating a scene of absolute carnage. The tranquility of the previous day had been shattered by an act of savage, incomprehensible violence. A group of local boys who were out bird-watching were the first to stumble upon the scene. From a distance, they saw the collapsed tent, and what they thought were just some items scattered around. They also saw a blonde-haired man walking away from the campsite. Not thinking much of it at the time, they continued on their way. It was a detail that would haunt the investigation for decades. It wasn't until around 11 o'clock in the morning that the true horror was discovered. A carpenter named Esko Oiva Johansson was swimming in the lake when he saw the campsite up close. The tent was slashed and torn, and lying on the ground outside were the bludgeoned bodies of Seppo Boisman and Anja Maki. Lying on top of the collapsed tent was Seppo's girlfriend, Mila Björklund. She was partially undressed from the waist down and had sustained numerous stab wounds, far more than the others. It was a brutal, bloody massacre. And inside the tent, barely clinging to life, was the 4th teenager, Niels Gustafsson. Niels was alive, but he was in a horrific state. He had a concussion, fractures to his jaw and facial bones, and bruises all over his face, but strangely, no defensive wounds. He was conscious, but in a state of deep shock, unable to provide any coherent information about what had happened. The police arrived to a scene that was both chaotic and baffling. The killer, or killers, had attacked the teenagers from outside the tent, slashing through the canvas and striking them through the fabric with a blunt object, likely a rock, and a knife. The attack was frenzied, vicious, and seemingly without motive. The investigation was immediately hampered by a series of critical mistakes. The police did not properly secure the crime scene, allowing onlookers and even other officers to trample all over potential evidence. They failed to call in the army to conduct a thorough search of the surrounding woods. Key items were missing from the scene, including the victims' wallets, some of their clothing, and most crucially, Niels Gustafsson's shoes. The murder weapons were never found. The police had a triple homicide on their hands, one survivor with amnesia, and a crime scene that was hopelessly contaminated. The mystery of Lake Bottom had begun. In the immediate aftermath, the investigation scrambled to find a suspect. The description of the blonde man seen leaving the campsite led police nowhere. Several local individuals were questioned, including a man named Carl Valdemar Gillstrom, who ran a nearby kiosk. Gillstrom was known to have a deep-seated hatred for campers and had been seen acting aggressively towards them in the past. Years later, on his deathbed, he allegedly confessed to the murders, but the police could never find any concrete evidence to link him to the crime, and the confession was considered unreliable. The case grew colder with each passing year. The shadow of suspicion also fell on a man known as Hansky, a rumored KGB spy who was treated at a nearby hospital for injuries on the same day as the murders. His clothes were reportedly covered in what looked like bloodstains. The doctor who treated him, Jorma Palo, later wrote several books about the case, convinced that Hansky was the killer. However, the police investigation at the time cleared him, stating he had a solid alibi. The trail went cold, and for over 4 decades, the Lake Bottom murders remained one of Finland's most disturbing and infamous unsolved crimes. Then, in 2004, the case took a shocking and unexpected turn. The Finnish National Bureau of Investigation reopened the case, armed with new forensic technology like DNA analysis. After re-examining the evidence, they announced a stunning conclusion. They were arresting the sole survivor, Niels Gustafsson. The prosecution's theory was that an argument had broken out among the teenagers, possibly fueled by jealousy. They claimed Niels, in a fit of rage, had murdered his 3 friends, then inflicted his own injuries to make it look like he was also a victim. The nation was stunned. Could the sole survivor have been the killer all along? The trial began in 2005, and the prosecution laid out its case. They pointed to Niels's shoes, which were found hidden several hundred yards from the campsite, as evidence that he had tried to conceal his involvement. However, the defense argued that Niels's injuries were too severe to be self-inflicted, and that an outside attacker was the only logical explanation. After a lengthy trial, the court acquitted Niels Gustafsson of all charges, citing insufficient evidence. And so, the mystery remains. What really happened that night at Lake Bottom? Was it a random madman, a disgruntled local, or was the killer inside the tent all along? We may never know. If you've seen The Shining, you know about the Overlook Hotel. What if I told you it was based on the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado? Nestled in the Rocky Mountains, it's a beautiful hotel with strange stories for over a century. Stephen King stayed there in 1974. As the only guests, the silence was unsettling. They were given room 217, rumored to have a history. King had a nightmare that inspired The Shining. But King's experience was just a taste. Built in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, whispers started early. Doors opened on their own, phantom piano music played, and ghostly children ran in the halls. The most famous spirits are Freeland and Flora Stanley. Mr. Stanley oversees the lobby. Flora plays phantom piano music in the concert hall. Elizabeth Wilson, a chambermaid, exploded in room 217 in 1911. Her spirit is still on duty. Guests report strange activity in room 217. The fourth floor is a playground for ghostly children. Lord Dunraven haunts room 401. Some see his face in the window. Paranormal investigators find incredible evidence. Guests often see figures that vanish. It's as if the past and present are bleeding together. Route 66, the Mother Road, a legendary ribbon of asphalt stretching from Chicago to Santa Monica. It represents freedom and the classic American road trip. Today, long stretches are bypassed and forgotten. These desolate sections become incredibly dark at night, and it's out there that people have started seeing something that doesn't belong. They call it the Shadow Man. The sightings are remarkably consistent. A driver will be cruising down a deserted stretch of old Route 66 late at night. Up ahead is a tall, impossibly thin, completely black figure, just a man-shaped hole in the universe. The figure doesn't move. It just stands there, motionless. The figure is gone, vanished completely. The encounters leave people deeply shaken, questioning their own sanity. They are shocked to discover they are not alone. Dozens, if not hundreds of others have seen the exact same thing. The Shadow Man of Route 66 is a shared phenomenon. Many drivers report that their car's electronics go haywire. Witnesses report a feeling of overwhelming dread that precedes the sighting. They report seeing shadow figures out of the corner of their eye in their own homes. So, what is this thing? There are countless theories, ranging from the mundane to the truly terrifying. The skeptical explanation is highway hypnosis and fatigue. A more paranormal theory suggests that the Shadow Man is a specific type of ghost. Then there's the darker theory that the Shadow Man isn't a ghost at all, but something else entirely. Some believe it could be an interdimensional being. Perhaps the most terrifying theory is that the Shadow Man is a malevolent entity that feeds on fear. The people who see it are not just witnesses, they are its prey. When you think of Key West, Florida, you probably picture sunshine, beautiful beaches, and a laid-back party atmosphere. But, tucked away in the historic Fort East Martello Museum is an artifact that is the stuff of pure nightmares. It's not an ancient weapon or a gruesome torture device, it's a child's toy. A 3-foot-tall doll, stuffed with wood wool with black beady button eyes and a stitched, unsettling smirk. He wears a little sailor suit and clutches a small stuffed lion. His name is Robert, and he is widely considered to be the most haunted doll in the world. And if you don't believe it, just ask the thousands of people who have felt his curse. The story of Robert the doll begins in the year 1904. The doll was given as a gift to a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto, who went by Gene. The story goes that the doll was given to Gene by a servant who worked for the Otto family, a woman who was skilled in voodoo and black magic and was allegedly mistreated by the family. It's believed she cursed the doll as an act of revenge before giving it to the young, unsuspecting boy. Gene immediately became inseparable from the doll. He named it Robert, after Archer Avenue, a lonely road southwest of Chicago, is where one of America's most chilling ghost stories was born. For nearly a century, drivers have reported seeing a young woman in a white dress, walking silently. They say she has blonde hair, blue eyes, and an ethereal beauty. Many describe an immediate temperature drop when she enters their car. She'll get in, usually in the back seat, and give an address just a little further down the road. They call her Resurrection Mary. The story says she was a young woman named Mary who had spent the evening dancing at the O. Henry Ballroom. She was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver, left to die on the side of the road. Her spirit is now eternally bound to that road. The destination she gives is the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. You turn to tell your mysterious passenger that you've arrived, but when you look into the back seat, there's no one there. The seat is empty. This is the account given by dozens of witnesses since the 1930s. Some have claimed that she passes directly through the solid locked cemetery gates. In 1976, a driver saw a young woman matching Mary's description inside the graveyard. There, on the cold, thick metal, were two perfect handprints. The handprints were literally seared into the iron bars. For years, these ghostly marks remained on the cemetery gates, a tangible piece of evidence for a ghost story. It often begins with a knock, a soft, hesitant tapping at your front door, usually late at night. Standing on your porch are two children, usually a boy and a girl, somewhere between the ages of 10 and 14. So you open the door, maybe just a crack, keeping the chain lock on, and ask them what they want. They'll say something like, "We need to use your phone," or "Our parents will be here soon. Can we just wait inside for a minute?" As they speak, they look up at you and you finally see their eyes. Just two solid, black, soulless orbs. This is the classic setup for an encounter with the black-eyed children. The phenomenon was first widely reported in the late 1990s by a Texas journalist named Brian Bethel, who shared his own terrifying experience online. The most unsettling aspect of these encounters is the intense, unnatural fear that grips the person who sees them. "You have to let us in," they'll say, their monotone voices carrying a chilling undertone of command. "We can't come in unless you invite us. Please, let us in." It's as if they are bound by some unknown rule that prevents them from crossing a threshold uninvited. So what are these terrifying entities? But the question remains, what would happen if someone did invite them across the threshold? Some believe they are demons, taking the form of children to prey on our desire to protect the innocent. Another theory leans more towards the extraterrestrial, alien-human hybrids wearing a flawed disguise. But perhaps the most disturbing theory is that we simply don't know. So if you hear that soft knock late at night, whatever you do, don't answer the door. Some of the most terrifying stories don't involve ghosts or monsters from ancient folklore. They involve people. People who are just wrong. This is one of those stories. It happened to a young man in Seattle who, like many of us, enjoyed taking long, late-night walks to clear his head. For 5 years he had walked the quiet, empty streets of his neighborhood after dark, and never once had an experience that made him feel unsafe. The silence and solitude were comforting, but one night, that comfort was shattered by an encounter so bizarre and so profoundly unsettling that it would haunt him forever. He was walking down a deserted side street, the only light coming from the occasional street lamp casting long, distorted shadows on the pavement. It was quiet, the kind of deep quiet you only get in a city in the dead of night. Then, in the distance, he saw a figure. It was a man, and he was dancing. It wasn't a normal kind of dance, not something you'd see in a club or a musical. It was a strange, jerky waltz, like a puppet being controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. The man would take one long, graceful step, and then shuffle back. He did this over and over, moving slowly down the street towards the narrator. The narrator stopped, watching this strange performance from a distance. He wasn't scared yet, just curious and a little weirded out. He figured the man was probably drunk or on drugs. He decided to cross the street to give the man a wide berth and continue on his way. But as he started to cross, the man stopped his strange dance and froze, standing perfectly still, facing the narrator's direction. The narrator, now feeling a bit more uneasy, kept his eyes on the man as he finished crossing the street. He hoped the man would just resume his weird dance and leave him alone, but he didn't. The moment the narrator was on the other side of the street, the man turned his body to face him directly. He was still about a block away, and it was too dark to see his face clearly, but the direct, focused attention was unnerving. The narrator started walking again, picking up his pace slightly. He glanced over his shoulder and saw that the man was now walking too. He wasn't waltzing anymore. He was moving with an exaggerated, tiptoe-like stride, like a cartoon character trying to sneak up on someone. It was so comical and out of place that it was deeply, deeply creepy. The narrator was now getting genuinely frightened. This was no longer just a weird, drunk guy, this was something else. This was predatory behavior. He quickly scanned the street, but it was completely empty. There was no one to help, nowhere to run. He was alone with this bizarre, tiptoeing man. He decided to stop and stare at the man, hoping to signal that he was aware of him and to scare him off. But the man didn't stop. He just continued his cartoonish, tiptoeing walk, closing the distance between them with every silent, exaggerated step. And then, he got close enough to be illuminated by another street lamp. And the narrator saw his face, and that's when the true horror of the situation revealed itself. The man's head was tilted back, his eyes were wide open and staring directly at the sky. But the most terrifying feature was his smile. It was a huge, broad... Okay, let's get into today's story. The Lemp family of St. Louis, Missouri in the late 19th century had achieved everything. Their brewery was a titan, their wealth endless, and their mansion a testament to their success. But the higher you climb, the further you fall. For the Lemps, the fall would be brutal. The first crack appeared in 1901 when Frederick Lemp died mysteriously, devastating his father, William Sr. In 1904, William Sr. took his own life, beginning a tragic legacy. His son Billy took over, but Prohibition destroyed the brewery. In 1922, Billy also took his own life. Another son, Charles, moved into the mansion. In 1949, he too committed suicide. The mansion was sold and converted into a boarding house where strange stories began to surface. Residents reported phantom footsteps, doors locking on their own, and lights flickering. Some saw shadowy figures and heard disembodied voices. Today, the Lemp Mansion is a restaurant and inn, considered one of the most haunted places in the U.S. Visitors Report paranormal activity, including the ghost of a small boy and the spirits of Lemp family members. The mansion stands as a chilling monument to the family's rise and fall, its walls echoing with sorrow. Picture a quiet Massachusetts town in the late 1970s. This is Dover, known for peaceful neighborhoods and dense woodlands. But in April 1977, that quiet was shattered by bizarre encounters. It would come to be known as the Dover Demon. On April 21, 1977, three teenagers, Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazzocca, and Andy Brody, were driving down Farm Street. Their headlights illuminated something bizarre perched on a stone wall. It was a creature unlike any animal they'd seen. Bill Bartlett described it as having a watermelon-shaped head, thin neck, spindly body, and pale skin. Most terrifying were its huge, glowing orange eyes. The creature scurried into the woods. Bill sketched what he saw, creating the iconic image of the Dover Demon. Hours later, John Baxter had his own encounter. Walking home, he saw a figure approaching. He described a creature similar to Bartlett's. John ran home terrified. Their stories corroborated each other. Their sketches were nearly identical. Panic began to set in. The final sighting occurred on April 22nd. Abby Brabham saw the creature. She said its eyes glowed green. The story exploded, drawing media and paranormal investigators. Then the Dover Demon vanished. It left behind terrified witnesses and a local legend. We may never know what they saw, but the Dover Demon remains a chilling reminder that strange things can hide just beyond the headlights. Imagine closing on your dream home. You've saved, worked hard, and it's finally yours. A beautiful house in a quiet, affluent suburb. This was the reality for Derek and Maria Broaddus in June of 2014. They purchased 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey for $1.3 million. It was the culmination of a lifelong dream, the perfect place to raise their three young children. But their idyllic dream was about to curdle into a waking nightmare. The first sign arrived just 3 days after closing, a plain white envelope addressed to the new owner. The words inside were not welcoming. They were cold, menacing, and deeply unsettling. The writer identified themselves as the Watcher and claimed their family had been watching 657 Boulevard for generations. The letter mentioned the Broaddus' children, referring to them as young blood. The Watcher had been observing them. The letter was filled with an unnerving level of detail. "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested?" the letter asked. "Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Derek Broaddus was frozen, the letter trembling in his hand. This was a direct and credible threat against his family. He contacted the police, who advised him not to tell anyone, as any one of them could be the suspect. A second letter arrived 2 weeks later, even more terrifying than the first. The letter demonstrated an even more intimate knowledge of their family. "I'm pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me," it read. The Watcher described watching the children. The Broaddus family was living in a state of constant fear. They halted renovations and never moved in. A third letter was the most direct and threatening of all. The writer delivered a final, bone-chilling threat. The Broaddus family was trapped. They couldn't move in, but they couldn't sell. Their dream had become a financial and psychological prison. The investigation went nowhere. Every lead turned into a dead end. The identity of the Watcher remains a mystery. The family eventually sold the house at a significant loss, but the question lingers. Who was the Watcher? And are they still watching? In the early 20th century, New Orleans was a city alive with the vibrant, improvisational pulse of jazz music. It was a place of celebration, of culture, of life lived out loud on humid, magnolia-scented nights. But beginning in the spring of 1918, a new, terrifying rhythm began to beat beneath the surface of the city's lively heart. A shadow fell over the Crescent City, a phantom who moved through the night with brutal, silent efficiency. He became known only by the tool of his trade, the Axeman of New Orleans, and for over a year he would hold the entire city hostage to a primal, unimaginable fear. The attacks were shockingly violent, and followed a chillingly specific pattern. The killer would typically chisel away a panel on a back door to gain entry into a home, completely ignoring any valuables inside. He wasn't a thief. His goal was something far more monstrous. Once inside, he would bypass any weapons the homeowners might have, and instead select an axe, or a straight razor, that belonged to the victims themselves, turning their own tools against them. The targets were almost always Italian-American grocers, a detail that led many to believe the killings were ethnically motivated, but no one could be sure. The first known attack occurred on May 23, 1918. Joseph and Catherine Maggio, a married couple who ran a grocery store, were discovered in their home in the early morning hours. They had been bludgeoned with an axe, their throats slit with a razor. The scene was a bloodbath. Investigators found the bloody axe in the bathroom and the razor on the lawn. A panel on the back door had been chiseled out, the killer's signature method of entry. A cryptic message was supposedly found scrawled in chalk near the bodies, but police, in their haste, washed it away before it could be properly documented, a mistake that would haunt the investigation. The city was horrified, but many hoped it was an isolated incident, a robbery gone terribly wrong. Those hopes were shattered just a month later. On June 27th, Louis Bassumer and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were attacked in the back of his grocery store. Both suffered horrific head injuries from an axe. Bassumer survived, but Lowe died 2 months later. Before she passed, she claimed the attacker was a dark, tall man. The pattern was undeniable. A killer was stalking the city's grocers, entering their homes like a ghost in the night and leaving behind a wake of carnage. Panic began to set in, and the legend of the Axeman was born. As the attacks continued through the summer and into the fall of 1918, the people of New Orleans descended into a state of collective terror. On August 5th, a pregnant woman named Mrs. Schneider was discovered by her husband, beaten and bloodied, her face a mask of gore. She survived, but couldn't provide a clear description of her attacker. Just 5 days later, Joseph Romano, an elderly man, was attacked in his sleep. His 2 nieces, sleeping in the same room, were awoken by the commotion to see a dark, heavy-set man fleeing the scene. Romano died from his head wounds. The Axeman was becoming bolder, more brazen. The fear was palpable. People began reinforcing their doors, buying guard dogs, and sleeping with guns under their pillows. The police were desperate, arresting dozens of suspects but releasing them all for lack of evidence. The killer seemed to be a phantom, able to slip in and out of homes undetected, leaving behind nothing but bloodshed and terror. The Italian-American community was living in a state of siege, convinced they were being targeted by a madman. The city that was once known for its joyous noise was now hushed, listening for the sound of a chisel on a back door in the dead of night. Then, on March 13, 1919, the case took its most infamous and bizarre turn. A letter, claiming to be from the Axeman himself, was published in the city's newspapers. It was arrogant, taunting, and utterly chilling. The writer claimed he was not a human being at all, but a demon, a spirit, and a fell demon from the hottest hell. He mocked the police for their incompetence, calling them foolish mortals and daring them to try and catch him. He claimed he could be worse than 1,000 leopards when angered, and that he alone knew who his next victims would be. The letter ended with a strange and terrifying ultimatum. The Axeman declared his love for jazz music. He announced that on the following Tuesday night, he would pass over the city of New Orleans. "And I swear by all the devils in the nether regions," he wrote, "that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned." For anyone who did not have a jazz band playing, the letter promised a grim fate. Well, as for the others, they had better look out, for it will be the axe for them. The city was given a choice: fill the night with music, or risk a visit from the Axeman. On the night of Tuesday, March 19th, 1919, the city of New Orleans responded to the Axeman's demand. It was a night that would go down in history. From the grandest dance halls to the smallest, most humble homes, the city erupted in a cacophony of jazz music. Professional bands played to packed houses while amateur musicians banged on pots and pans. People who couldn't play an instrument turned their phonographs up to full volume, blasting the sounds of ragtime and Dixieland out into the humid night air. It was a citywide exorcism, a desperate attempt to ward off a demon with the very music that defined their culture. The night was a surreal spectacle of defiance and fear. The air, usually thick with the scent of jasmine and river water, was now thick with the blare of trumpets and the frantic rhythm of drums. It was a party born of terror, a celebration commanded by a killer. And true to his word, the Axeman did not strike that night. Not a single attack was reported. For one bizarre, music-filled night, the city had appeased the monster that haunted its streets. But the relief was temporary, because everyone knew the music would eventually have to stop. The question was, what would happen then? After the infamous jazz night, the Axeman seemed to lay low for a time. The city breathed a cautious sigh of relief, hoping the nightmare was finally over. But the silence was broken in August of that year. Sarah Lahman, a young woman, was attacked in her home. She was found unconscious with severe head injuries and missing teeth, but she survived. Then, in September, a man named Steve Boca was struck with an axe while he slept, but he managed to stumble to a neighbor's house for help and lived. The Axeman was back, his thirst for violence apparently unsated. The final confirmed attack occurred on October 27, 1919. Mike Pepitone, a grocer, was killed in his home. His wife, who was sleeping beside him, was awoken by a noise and saw a large man fleeing the room. The scene was disturbingly familiar: the chiseled door panel, the bloody axe left behind. And then, just as mysteriously as he appeared, the Axeman vanished. The attack stopped. No more letters were sent. No more homes were violated. To this day, the identity of the Axeman of New Orleans remains one of America's most chilling, unsolved mysteries. The demon who demanded a jazz concert simply faded back into the shadows, leaving behind a legacy of terror and a silence more frightening than any noise. The tales we've explored today, from the unseen Watcher of Westfield to the terrifying Axeman of New Orleans, are more than just campfire stories. They are rooted in real events, real fear, and real people whose lives were turned upside down by encounters with the strange and the terrible. These stories remind us that sometimes the most frightening things aren't confined to the movie screen. They can happen in quiet suburban towns, in bustling cities, and on lonely stretches of highway. The world can be a much stranger and much more dangerous place than we often like to admit, and that's why I'm always so interested in hearing from you. The strange and the dark aren't just things that happen to other people in other places. Many of you have likely had your own brushes with the unexplained, your own encounters that left you with a story to tell and a lingering sense of unease. So, if you have a story, I want you to go down to the comments section and share it. Whether it's a ghostly encounter, a brush with a strange creature, or a situation that you just can't explain, let us know. Reading through your experiences is one of my favorite things to do. Thank you all so much for joining me for this compilation of truly terrifying American horror stories. I hope they gave you that familiar feeling of dread that we all, for some strange reason, seem to enjoy. If you appreciate these deep dives into the dark side of human experience, and you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, the best thing you can do is give that like button a very suspicious look, and then subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue to find and share these incredible stories with all of you. So until the next time we gather to explore another story of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, please be safe out there. Remember to lock your doors, maybe keep the lights on tonight, and whatever you do, if you get a letter from the Watcher, maybe just move. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.